We are live. All right. Welcome to everybody in the chat right now, and welcome to Adam, our guest
Oh,
speaker today.
hey
Can
there.
can somebody make sure that I'm actually live? I need to. I'm gonna actually just go on Discord real quick, and no, I can't do that. It's okay. Right. A little flustered here, a little unprepared because I was not 100% comfortable with the streaming stuff, but we're here
Oh
and we're
yeah.
doing it. So hopefully it'll turn out great. Um,
Yeah, we're
yeah. So thank you for coming, Adam. I'm gonna do a quick intro before we get started. So Adam is a U of T alumni. He did computer science, and he was part of one of the development teams in the CSC 404 game design course, where he created Pitfall Planet with one of his peers. Pitfall Planet won Best Overall Game Design Award at the 2015 Level Up Showcase, and his most recent game is A Short Hike, which was released in 2019 and won the 2020 Indie Games Festival Grand Prize, among other awards. And it was just released on Nintendo Switch last month. Anything to add, or was that sort of a sum of it?
that pretty much covers everything. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let's jump
Uh,
into it. So I'd like to start with a simple one. How and when did you decide that you wanted to make games? Was there a moment in your life where you sort of realized, like, hey, this is what I want to do?
let's see. I've been kind of lucky that I feel like ever since I was a kid, I feel like I've always wanted to make video games. Um, it's kind of been like a one of my earliest dreams. Um, it's kind of weird to think about how that actually came true. That's pretty good. Um, but I think like even back in elementary school, I used to use an RPG maker, and I'd be making a bunch of like little experiments and stuff like that. And I think as throughout most of my life, like after I used RPG Maker, then I started using Game Maker, and then after that, I moved on to XNA through most of my university years, and then more recently, I've been using Unity for everything. Um, so I guess yeah, I think I've been wanting to make games for like most of my life, and I guess I'm lucky that I've actually gotten to do it.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of us in that club share that sentiment. I think that's sort of a similar belief that we share in GDDC. A lot of our members are in kind of that state as well, and so it's great to have someone else on here who has that experience that can sort of share some of that wisdom.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so,
think that's
oh, go
oh
ahead.
yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say it's cool that GDC are still going strong and being a club. And I mean, like I think when I first started university in like 2010, which makes me feel super old right now to think that's when I started university. I joined the club, and like it was at least for me, it was really helpful for me to get involved in games. I think. Um,
Yeah,
like
I'm curious, what was the club like back then? Was it a lot of people, or was it sort of a smaller scale thing?
Yeah, see, it's always been like I've been involved with the club from every year pretty much since 2010 to 2015, and I started out as usually in the beginning of the year there's a lot of people, but as the semester gets going and everyone gets busy with their work and stuff, I think it kind of like thins out more to like a uh, I don't know, more of like a core crowd. But I think every year it's been a little bit like sometimes it's had bigger, more popular years, and sometimes it's had smaller years. I think one of the most popular years when I was when I was starting university in 2010, which I think was a good opportunity because I don't know, there's a really big community there. People have been making games for a while. I'm really passionate about it, and just me like making games for the game design deathmatch. It was kind of like it was kind of like a big deal to me, just because it was the only kind of real opportunity I had back then to like make a game and get other people to play it and then to get feedback on it. I guess back then there wasn't itch.io, which is now I kind of think I consider the main platform for sharing indie games. So it's kind of like I didn't really have a way to get even people to really try it and like share my work with other people. So um, I don't know. I remember putting in a lot of hours in between schoolwork to work on the games for GDC, and yeah, it's just hear that it's still going strong.
Yeah, it's a great, it's very like much a unique community to me. Like there's no other community like it, and it could only happen at, a university level because I think like, there's when you're in sort of a smaller like high school kind of thing, which is sort of the experience a lot of our first years are coming in from. It's harder to get people sort of congregated around common niche interests like game design and development. And I think that's the special thing about the university game development experience is that becomes possible when you have a larger pool to say
Yeah.
of people. So
Uh-huh.
speaking of GDDC, what resources did you find most helpful at GDDC or at U of T as a whole when getting started in your university game development career?
Right. I think looking back on it for me, I think I might have just said a moment ago, the game design deathmatch was, I think for me, like a I don't know, I felt like it was a cornerstone of like the game design development club. Like every year things would change. Like there'd be maybe different leadership, there'd be like different events that we'd have, different plans throughout the year. But the game design deathmatch was always a consistent part of it, and always kind of like brought out the most participation. And I think for me, just the experience of trying to make a game and having it finished and getting it like looked at critically even by your peers. I think that process, it was like kind of the first opportunity for me to even do that was with the game design deathmatch. And I think like I don't know, the excitement of being able to enter into a competition even, like and I don't know, there wasn't a lot of opportunities to do that either. So
Yeah.
just the motivation of being part of that kind of competition and seeing your peers work and having your own work part of that. I think just the opera having like a concrete goal to work towards, because when you're making games on your own, sometimes it's like it's hard to set your own deadline. It's hard to know when it's done, and it's easy just to like jump onto the next project because you get excited about something, so you never finish anything. I think having that kind of concrete goal and the support network of your peers to meet it, I think was at least for me like at least a very useful part of the game design and development club.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts of it too. Is the death
Mm.
match every year. It's really fun to just look at everybody's games and like different people's takes on the theme is always really fun.
Mhm.
Last year our theme was corruption, and so we had a lot of like really cool projects that did a lot of different things from like thematically and artistically looking at corruption as like a gameplay element or as like an artistic element. But then one of the games I remember took it like very very literally and did this thing where it like pretended that your hard drive was corrupted and it
Mhm.
like corrupted a file on your hard drive and said until you beat the game you can't access this file. It was basically the
Oof.
thing. Yeah, so it was very meta. It was very like fourth wall breaking kind of thing. It was a super
Yeah.
cool project.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And I think that's the cool part about it is seeing people's takes on these themes and stuff, and having the chance to do a larger scale project where you can really
Mhm.
commit and like get your ideas out. I think that's what makes that possible.
Yeah,
So
and I'm thinking of game jams in general. Like when I was in university, I went to a lot of game jams. Like I don't know if it's still happening this year, but Toe Jam.
mhm.
Um, I like I started going to that in second year, and I've been trying to go to Toe Jam every single year since. And there's other ones like Ludum Dare, and then other popular Toronto one, Global Game Jam.
Right.
Just doing those every year, I think that was a pretty good experience for myself. And
Hmm.
I don't know, I'm kind of losing my train of thought.
It's okay.
Yeah.
No, totally. So off of that as a jumping point,
Hmm.
what tools do you recommend for beginners, for people starting out? Are there any resources online or specific tools you use that really help you learn the basics of game design and their development more broadly and sort of get the fundamentals down? Is there anything you'd recommend?
Oh, that's hard to say. I think for me, I've always had a very like hands-on approach. Like I don't really think as hard about the design aspect. I just kind of get into the computer and start putting things together. And then as I'm like putting things together, interesting stuff will start to emerge. And kind of like I'll figure out from like the idea that I'm figuring out from like what I'm working on. It comes into shape kind of on its own, sort of. I mean, that's not to say I'm not like thinking about it, and I don't have like active design plans and stuff like that. But it's like I think for myself, I've always been like focused on learning the tech kind of first was a thing for me. So I'm thinking about when I started learning to make games, it was usually driven by me wanting to be able to make a specific thing. Like I used Game Maker when I started out, and I still think that would be a great tool to start with in game development. Uh, and I, initially used their drag and drop system to script all my games, and that was a really good learning tool for me to like both learn how to program and also kind of get me introduced to game logic. And there was a lot of tutorials online that I could follow for Game Maker. But then again, this was me learning Game Maker like uh, back in like 20 or 2007, and I don't think most of the tutorials I used, and even the version of Game Maker is still available to now. But I think the general like, there's probably lots of other good online resources. I think what I would say is, don't start with your most ambitious game. Start with something really really simple. Like my first game in Game Maker was I was following the tutorial. It was called Click the Clown. You click on the clown, and you try to avoid not clicking on not clicking on things that aren't the clown, and you do it as fast as you can. And it's not an exciting game at all, but there was a satisfaction in just getting that tutorial game running. And once I did Click the Clown, I moved on to making a little platformer in the game, and I mostly spent a lot of my early times like trying to make copies of other games, just learning like thinking of a game that I like and seeing how I can try to make like some really crappy version of it myself with the tools that I had available. So I kind of think if you want to learn game design, you know, I really like to say that you should get in there and just start making things. And like once you get the habit of making things, you'll kind of like and you've made a few things, you're going to be learning from your previous games and your mistakes and stuff like that. And I think like for myself, like a Short Hike was like the first like big commercial game I released. I guess before that I worked on a Piffle Planet, and before that I worked on like, I don't know, I had like 20 like game jam games that I'd worked on in the past, like little things. And some of them had lots of good things to them, and a lot of them had flaws. But I think like I learned from each little bit. Like watching people play your game is also super important, and then making observations from that. I also want to quickly shout out Game Maker's Toolkit is a good design YouTube channel that I've been watching lately. It's a good one to get some broad introduction to some various game design topics.
Yeah.
But
no,
yeah, sorry.
I mean, go ahead. Go ahead. My bad.
I'm just listing off a bunch of random things, but
No, it's
I don't
cool.
have a
I was just gonna
yeah.
mention like Game Maker's Toolkit does this really good series on like Zelda design for their dungeons that I was just watching today, and it's fascinating stuff. It's really well done. He's got all these graphs for it and stuff too. It's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a very wonderful series.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's kind of hard to find design focused mediums out there for learning design. I think it's very gated online in the sense that the resources are hard to access, but it's great that there's channels and things out there that are sort of making it accessible to people. Okay, so I had a couple questions about a Short Hike, if we can move there for a bit. So when I was
Yeah,
playing
sure.
through it, I noticed that one thing I appreciated about it was like the interesting and unique like set of characters that were created in the game. So I wanted to ask, what is your process when creating characters? Do you have a specific idea in mind for the types of characters you want to create and kind of holes you want to fill, or how does that look?
Um, the process for writing characters for a Short Hike was at least pretty improvisational when I first started working on it. I didn't actually like the my initial scope for a Short Hike, or my idea of the game, was something really small, like smaller than even what it ended up being. And I kind of because I didn't plan on this game like wasn't trying to make like my next big hit, which I was very lucky that it ended up being, but I was just trying to make something small that I could release to get practice and to step away from the other project I've been focusing on the time because I was kind of I had a bit of a dead end with that. Um, but anyways, so I guess like I felt like in the previous projects I worked on, I found writing very difficult. Like I thought it was something like a really important aspect of story-driven games, and I found that I wasn't ever really happy with my writing, and like even just trying to figure out a whole plot was difficult for me. So when it came to writing a short hike, I figured that since this isn't going to be a big project, I'll just like write whatever silly thing comes to mind when I open up the text editor. So I went in there and I, usually think of a character and then some sort of like base idea of like what they're going to be doing or some sort of idea they're going to explore, and I just start writing like just like without really thinking very carefully about it. And eventually, if I kind of like, I would end up with like the script of the script that I as I was writing it, I would kind of get ideas for more things to put in the script. Um, it would often be like I'd be writing a character and they'd be talking about like a race, and then I'd be like, oh, I guess I got to make other characters that are in this race, and then I'd write those characters, and like I kind of like if I had one person that was talking a little bit about like oh, my nephew's running in the race over there, then I'd be like, oh, I'll actually make that nephew over there and you can talk to them as well, and there will be a little link um if you like talk to both characters. And so I guess like overall I didn't feel like super confident in my writing at the time that I was doing it. I think now, like a year later, looking back on it, I'm like pretty happy with how it went and the reception. But at the time, I never felt like I wasn't sure if I was writing anything super great. Um, so I guess, yeah, I guess my general thing that I would say is that I kind of approached it as kind of like writing things on the fly and then showing it to other people and seeing what kind of response I got, like if it was like if it made them laugh or anything. I threw a lot of the dialogue that I wrote like by my partner, who I usually look over everything that I worked on when she came home from work. Um, yeah,
Wicked.
uh,
I think
yeah.
that sounds like a very interesting process. I like how you sort of networked the characters together. I found that was really interesting when I played through it. I think my
Mhm.
favorite characters were there was the tortoise and the hare, but the tortoise was really fast and he had like the hare's headband or something. And I think
Uh-huh.
that was a super interesting character because it sort of took that story and like flipped on its head. I thought it was funny. Um,
Yeah, like I was thinking about the like for the story for that character was again just something that came kind of like improvisational. Like I started with I wanted there to be a character that gave you running shoes and like a bit of a power up, and I was like, oh, why would they give you running shoes? And I guess also kind of the inspiration for that game. There was a game I played the year before called The Haunted Island of Frog Detective, and in the game, you're kind of like, it's a very small, cozy game where you're on an island and you just talk to people. You walk around and look at kind of the cute environment, and everybody's kind of got like some sort of silly problem, and they want you to like usually go find an item for them, and then when you return the item to them, they'll give you another item. Use that item to, solve another quest. So it's kind of like a very like simple, like kind of like a quest like item system. And I guess when I was working on a short hike, when it came to the running shoes, I was trying to think of like, oh, this character's got some small but personal problem, and there's something that you have to go collect. And then I was like, oh, maybe it'll be their headband. And rather than putting it somewhere in the world that's hidden on like the hidden in the forest, I thought it would be fun to just put it on another person. Like these ideas would come as I was writing.
mhm.
But anyway, sorry.
No,
Just
that's great. That's
yeah.
the kind of stuff we're looking for is insight into your games and your process. I think that idea of like taking a functional item and then thinking of the function first and then attaching flavor and narrative and style to it is very like a Nintendo style of design. Like they very much focus on their gameplay elements first and then wrap it in a a narrative sense that, or a narrative flavor that makes sense with respect to like how the game works functionally. I really admire that kind of design pattern. Um,
Cool.
so speaking of game design, so in terms of the mechanics of how your game works, what is your process for tackling the design of games? Is it iterative, or do you have a clear plan of what you'd like to do from the start?
I think I use a very iterative approach. I think like yeah, again, I feel like I like to start just putting things into the game as soon as possible and seeing what sticks. Like a short hike in particular, it started off as like this, just kind of like a nature scenery diorama that I was making. I had this artistic idea that I wanted to explore without really any gameplay in mind, and I started putting that together in Unity. And after I put in a little person around in there that could like move around, I kind of felt like a platformer would be a good fit for this game. And once I had that person like running around, like double jumping and climbing on walls, I kind of felt like I don't know. I guess I just kept putting in elements in a way, and it started to feel like it was coming together. There was a point where I needed to sit down and like properly scope the game. I think like I spent about like a month prototyping, just kind of like putting in whatever felt like was right to me. And then when I decided that I was going to make this like a full project and commit some time to it, I wrote a game design document. So I tried to solidify the design and figured out what my milestones were, what my inspirations were, and how the whole game loop would work. Um, so I guess for me, I think just going on purely a short hike, I kind of have I like some rough ideas I want to explore. I start putting them in there, and then once they're coming together, I kind of like try and tie things together with a game design document, and then follow that plan. But that's not what I've done for every game, but at least that's what's worked most recently for me.
Wicked. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's about the questions I had written down, but we've got a bunch of questions that our members from the GDBC have submitted, and we're going to start moving to some of those now. So someone from the club asks, what kinds of games do you find the most interesting, and are there any recent indie games that have sparked your interest?
That's a really tough question. I think when I hear like what are my favorite indie games or what do I find the most interesting, it's difficult for me because I find so many games interesting. I kind of feel like I personally I don't think there's really any genre of video game that I could point out and be like I don't like that. Um, uh, so with regards to things that I like, uh,
And I think more
I
broadly,
think in the
oh, go ahead if you had.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's all right. I was gonna say in recent years, I'm trying to think what I haven't actually been playing a ton of video games lately. I've been busy spending more time working on stuff, and then also just playing like I have like a comfort food game, which is Overwatch, which I play a lot, but I haven't played a lot of variety of new games. But I think in the previous year, like something that stuck out to me is I really enjoyed Slay the Spire and Into the Breach. I like strategy games like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I was really impressed with Slay the Spire's design and how they approached like RPG battles in kind of a novel way to me in the deck builder format. Because I'd been working on an RPG before, and I was struggling with I wasn't happy with the battle design in the game, and just seeing like how engaging Slay the Spire was, and it made like you didn't even need a story, just like constant battles in the game, and it was very engaging. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting project. Another great game was Baba Is You, which I played over the past year, and it was just like, oh, it's an ingenious, wonderful idea that is so well executed. It's just much more to say than it's a very original, fantastic take on the original block pusher puzzles.
Oh yeah.
I also like a lot of like narrative indie games. One that I played this year was Wide Ocean Big Jacket, which was it's a very short cozy narrative game where it's just about like a group of four people who are going camping, and nothing like nothing crazy happens. It's a very like to life sort of situation, but it's kind of just a very nice slice of life game, and
Yeah, yeah.
has relatable and sweet moments. So those are some games that I can think of from recently that I've played.
Cool stuff. Well, for those in the audience, now you've got a list, stuff you can play if you need recommendations. I think Slay the Spire, like you said, it's a very cool take on that sort of like turn-based RPG thing with the cards, because I think one of the biggest problems RPGs face, like traditional RPGs, is that the turn-based system is often like you fall into ruts of like what you need to do in your battles, right? Like for Pokemon, you need to choose the most super effective move, or else it's what are you
Yeah.
doing, right? And so Slay the Spire takes that and sort of tackles that in an interesting way. Um,
Hmm.
so moving on, we've got another question from the club. So what is a good way of deciding whether to drop a project and try something new, or whether to keep pushing forward with what you're already doing?
Mm. That's a hard question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think, for context, when I started a short hike, I've been working on a different game like for a year before it. It was a game inspired by the Paper Mario series, and I'd put like a year's worth of work into it. So it was like I already had like a demo that was about an hour to 2 hours long, and I guess kind of felt like I was in too deep at that point, that I like really needed to finish this because I've already spent so much time on it, and if I were to not finish it, then that whole year would have been a waste. Um, so eventually, I made the decision to kind of like shelve it, like at least for the moment, like and work on something really small and achievable, which ended up being a short hike. And a short hike originally was supposed to be a 4 month project, and I did finish the first version of short hike after those 4 months. Um, but I guess like because after I released the game, the 4 month version, I got a lot of positive reception that I kept working on that, and then built into what came out today. Um, but as for that decision of deciding to put the other game aside, it was comfortable that like I wasn't like killing the other project. Like it would still be there at the end of the 4 months or whenever I go back to it. So it's like it was a because it wasn't a huge like a bad decision to make, because it was like I could go back at any time. But the decision to like stick with what you're doing or do something new is not easy, because like video games are hard to make, and during the middle of making any game is like it's gonna kind of suck sometimes, or at least for me. There's always the beginning of a game is like kind of the golden era where it's very exciting because you're getting something completely new and you're experimenting and you've got all these fun ideas to put together. But it comes to actually like tying everything together with in a bow to release a product, there's like so much more that you have to do, and it's
Yeah.
sometimes you can lose the motivation during that part when you stop seeing your game. Like when you've been seeing your game for a year at that point, it's not new to you anymore. It's not exciting. Um, so sometimes you maybe don't see your game for what it is. Like someone who's been looking at it for like 6 months, um, uh, it doesn't seem maybe as original or special as like when you show it to somebody new for the first time. They're, all that initial like excitement that you had when you were first working on it, maybe you can sometimes see in the other person, which is helpful and inspiring. So what I mean to say is, I don't know. Sometimes for me, it ended up working to not to switch to something else. That ended up being a very good decision for myself. Um, but it can be hard to say if you've really reached like a proper a proper like creative block in your work, or if it's just like a hump that you need to get over to finish it.
Right. That's
Yeah,
a
I guess it depends on the project.
Yeah. There you go. So, speaking of, you mentioned sort of the release process for releasing a full game. How did you build up buzz for a short hike around its release, and how did you get people excited about the game? I think that can be one of the hard parts for people releasing their full titles, and could you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I think video game marketing That's like a whole topic that I'd never thought of until recently. It's very important because there's so many games out there, and it's hard to get people to notice and care about your work. Um, so it's good that there's like the tools to making games are so accessible now, and there's lots of amazing stuff being made. But um, I think there's a challenge, you know, spend a long time working on something and making sure that people are actually going to try it can be difficult. So for myself, I was lucky that in the years leading up to working on a short hike, I had gotten a lot of advice from people about indie game marketing. I had gotten to attend an accelerator called Stugan, where it was actually really amazing. I was invited to stay at a cabin in Sweden with like 20 other game developers for 2 months. It was actually amazing. I think the program's not going right now because of the pandemic. But if you ever get the opportunity to apply to that, it was a really wonderful experience. But there, they had a lot of speakers come by and talk about different aspects of game development, including marketing and like budgeting and a lot of the development side or the business side of game development. It's like something I didn't know when I was starting was that being an indie dev is running your own business. And there's a whole making the game is one thing, but then doing everything else that a regular business owner has to do is kind of a lot. And marketing is one of those things. So I also in the same year I went to Stugan, I applied to the Fund Futures program. It's run by the Hand-Eye Society here in Toronto, and it's has funding from the Ontario government. And it's kind of like a program that helps indie devs learn more about the business side of game development. So I think it's like about like a 6 to 7 week crash course on just like how to budget your game, how to market your game, how to work with lawyers and accountants, how to incorporate, how to apply for funding, all sorts of stuff like that. And that was really helpful as well. And then so I think like I was lucky to get a lot of opinions and advice on marketing your game because it's a whole thing. And I think one of the things that I took away was that it's useful to think of marketing as like an integral part of your game. I know that sounds a little bit like you're selling out, like you're making a game just to market it or anything, but it's just if you want it to be a commercial success or something like that, I think it's at least important to, like at the very beginning of your game, think about like what makes your game unique. Like what is going to be the hook? Is it going to be a visual element or is it going to be a gameplay element? And what kind of audience that you expect might like your game and stuff like that. There was a really great, and then like for me, like people like talk about video game marketing as like a really vague like term. It's just like, oh, market your video game. It came to actionable things I could actually do. It was a lot more difficult. There was this great talk I saw by Gabby DiCatanzaro about called Indie Game Marketing 101. I saw it at one of the events that I went to here in Toronto, but I think the talk is still up on YouTube. And it was a really great talk to kind of like introduce me to the various concepts of marketing, how to incorporate marketing into your game from the very beginning and like have a plan, and how to like do actionable things like how to run a Discord for your game or like to build a social media community, and then how to contact press and handle like the launch and post release. So just I think that was a really useful talk for me. I feel like I've gotten a bit off topic, but
No, this is exactly what the kind of thing I was hoping you'd say, and the kind of information that we get from that question. I think that's an aspect
Right.
people don't often consider in terms of like a game development and stuff, and so it's good to know that there are resources out there that can help people who are looking to publish their game.
did want to say for myself, like what I think my plan kind of was for myself. I'd been posting my work on Twitter for a while. I think Twitter is like a space that is popular for game developers, and like initially I'd start off with the hashtag game dev, which it seems like there's a lot of people using, and I would try to find I'd like be sharing interesting gifts of my game, try to find like moments that I thought were cool, or like a nice like small contained nugget I could share with people, and I'd be posting them constantly, or not constantly, but like I don't know, like twice a month on my Twitter account. And was a very slow thing at first, and but over the years, like I've been doing that since like 2014. I think I started posting like on social media. I originally had a Tumblr and a Twitter account, and I was always sharing my development updates on both of those. Um, and yeah, eventually Twitter ended up being the one that I spent the most effort on. But I just like over time, like I connected with other people like over Twitter. Like I was seeing the great work that other people were working on, and I was kind of like collecting followers that I could like share my work with as well. So by the time that a short hike came around, I already had like a following that I could lean on a bit. Um, so I was sharing like a leading up to the release of Short Hike, I was trying to find like interesting gifs that I thought like would be like a capture kind of the game's essence in like a tiny like 10-second like image, um, and I would be sharing them and trying to get stuff that trying to come up with something that people wanted to share themselves that they'd want to like retweet or share with their friends. So leading up to release, it was a lot of trying to just promote it on Twitter was kind of a main platform. And I think once I released the game, enough people had like seen it on Twitter and like retweeted it that I got like a good push like of traffic towards my Steam page. And once you hit a certain threshold on Steam, it seems like the kind of like the Steam algorithm realizes that your game exists and starts promoting it a little bit itself.
Right.
And that was helpful for me to kind of like see that initial push of like Twitter users kind of like brought my game up to the new and trending page on Steam, and it kind of like gave my game like a strong, like for an indie game, a strong launch.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, it was like in comparison to like the Switch launch that came out this year, it was like a very like a much more quiet like launch. And my game kind of I feel like slowly grew over kind of like word of mouth. I think like some of the articles that like helped drive traffic to my game were written like a month after my game came out or 2 months. And then also like the end of year stuff where people covered games that they liked that year. It was also helpful to get people to know about my game. And I think I actually had my best like sales day like in the Christmas season, rather like 3 months after like the game had come out. So it's like I guess like that my expectation was that the first day of sales was always supposed to be your greatest, but for me it was kind of like a very strange curve where it would go up and down or depending on things that were going on in the going on in the world.
Yeah.
um,
No, I think
yeah.
definitely it probably helps to have that snowball of people on Twitter that can then just move to Steam and get you on that front page. I think it's probably it takes a lot longer than people think marketing, and I think that is a good tip to post constantly about it. Of course, I don't have any experience with it, but it seems as though like those are the games I follow on Twitter and Instagram and stuff are the ones that are consistently posting over a long period of time, and I'm getting a
Right.
window into their development kind of thing.
Hmm.
So, are there are there any aspects of game development that you find stressful or strenuous? And if so, how do you deal with it? What are your strategies for taking a break, I guess, and taking time off?
Right. Um, there's a lot of aspects of game development that can be stressful. I think any time around launch is going to be a stressful time, either just before it or any time after. Um, in particular, I'm not great at dealing with the business side of game development. So whenever I need to deal with anything that involves lawyers or accountants or taxes
Ugh.
or a corporation, anything like that, I'm like, I'm gonna procrastinate on this for as long as I can, and that's not a great thing. But it's it's the part that I find the most unpleasant. But there's also some parts in the middle of the game development, at least for me, where I'm like kind of lose motivation for either like I don't know, the end seems so far away, or I don't feel inspired, or I feel like I'm running out of energy. And then I like feel down on myself for not working and producing producing at the output that I want to be. I always feel like I wasn't working hard enough or something, and it's kind of like when you're working by yourself all the time, you don't have a boss to or you don't have anybody to evaluate your work or to hold you responsible. It's kind of like I put a lot of that on myself instead, and sometimes that can be a bit tough.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? Don't know. Still working on all that. Um, I guess taking a break is a good aspect. I think there's some GDC talks I've seen that talk about burnout, something that'll happen if you've been working on video games by yourself for so long and just running with things. Um, but I guess particular strategies, um, not entirely sure of anything that comes to mind, but
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think
yeah.
that's a really tough one. Is like how do you balance the thing you're passionate about and you know mental health, and I think that's a tough question that doesn't have a very clear answer. It's going to differ person to person. But thanks for giving us your opinion on that.
No,
Um,
yeah, no problem.
yeah, so I think we're just about done for our written down questions. So we're going to go to the chat now. I'm going to scroll back up and try to see what kind of questions people asked there, and we'll go through those. So Jason Lee asks, did you take the game design course at U of T, and do you want to talk about that course for a bit?
Yeah, sure. CSC 404. It's the course that I took. I had a really great experience in CSC 404. I took it in my final year of university, and I was paired with a really great team. I was working with two friends of mine from U of T, and then some people from OCAD that we were matched with that we also became friends with. And I was really lucky to have a very talented team on like the programming side and on the artistic side. And um, just for me again, like having like a I don't know some like, structure to like the game making process, at least as a student, was really helpful for the creative process and actually getting something done and like motivating us to like create something for the competition. Um, I just think that that class, by the time you're in fourth year and you've already learned a bit about like how to make games either through the club or you've like have the technical skills you need at that point to make games. I think like putting kind of like everything you've learned throughout university and for the club into like one final project, and with your like ideally a group of friends, and in a way that it's like a year long thing. You're like uh, putting a lot of time and energy into, and at the end you get to show it off at Level Up Showcase, which I'm not sure if will be happening this year, unfortunately. But it was always a really exciting event. It's just being able to bring your work to some public event where people get to try it and you get to watch people play it and you get to see all the work being done by your peers. It was just a really special moment. I feel like you had been working throughout the entire semester and even maybe your entire university, career to get to the point where you get to show off your work like that. And so I had a really good experience. I think one thing your mileage, um, you're definitely going to want to see. Um, Try and find a team that you work well with.
Right.
I think there's like different levels of motivation, between everybody working on like they're putting effort into different classes sometimes and different things in their life, and some people are going to be more into the CSC 404 than others, and I think it really helps like if you have to kind of get a little bit lucky. Like we were really lucky with our OCAD team we were work with. They were all really great artists.
Hmm.
Uh,
I
but
think, yeah, I think that
yeah,
sentiment is group work is always tricky, right? Especially
yeah,
when
it really is.
sometimes you're matched up with people you don't know previously. I think we've all had an experience like that throughout our university or high school careers. So
Yeah,
yes, but CSC 404, thumbs up. It
yeah,
seems
it's
like a
great.
cool
I
course.
had a great time.
Good, good. Okay, so we have a question from Derek. Do you think courses are? Do you think courses about creating I think what he's saying is, do you think the pressure of creating good games hinders your creativity? Do you think there's like paradigms or standards that restrict creativity in the interest of making a good game going around right now?
I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, it's like one thing that I think of myself is like now that I like ever since I learned more about like indie game marketing and stuff like that, it's kind of like when I approach a project at the beginning, it's like a little bit like how am I going to make this something people actually want to play? It's like it's fine. Like I'm not going to work on something that I wouldn't want to make, but it's definitely like it limits to what I feel like is like almost a valid thing to make. Like it's something that has to, I think, have a, valid appeal to like a whole bunch of people, or like at least have like a plan to like market it. Like there's sometimes games that you might have in your mind that are kind of weird or experimental, or like don't really have a solid point, and maybe wouldn't necessarily like be something that is commercially viable. And I think like some of those ideas might not get to see the light of day if you're kind of always focusing on like what is marketable. Um, but I think like the idea of like what is a good game and trying to head towards that.
Hmm.
I think at least in the creative process, when you're trying to learn how to make things, I think I've seen the cases where people aren't able to make the games that they want to make, right? Like they're not able to make Skyrim yet; they can only make Click the Clown, and I don't really want that to be something that like holds people back.
It's
Like
true.
making bad games, making mistakes is all part of the process, and I think it's important to try and like treasure the Click the Clowns that you make and other people's Click the Clowns. Like the steps that you take along the way are quirky and they're kind of raw. They're not like somebody that spent a long time trying to like figure out how to optimize a game perfectly for lots of people. It's just kind of like an expression or an experiment put together. And I think like kind of celebrating those tiny steps that you make is important if you're trying to become if you're trying to get more into making games. And so if making a bad game, like it's just not being good, is like a fear that maybe holds you back from completing a project or even just working on new things, I'd try and encourage you. So like there's no you can make a game for yourself. It doesn't
Right.
have to be a good game for everybody.
That's a good
Um,
point. I think a lot of people are discouraged by trying to create games that fit certain industry standards or just cultural standards, and I think that that's not necessarily always what people want to make. So I agree with that sentiment. Totally encourage new ideas, regardless of whether or not they're good ideas, quote unquote, of
mhm.
course. So,
Yeah.
Honest Rogue Games asks, Adam, do you know any lesser known indie devs from Toronto that he could follow in terms of their process? So, do you know of any like indie devs you'd recommend checking out?
From Toronto, yeah. I mean, like the Toronto's got such like a great community. There's so many developers here doing awesome stuff. Um, I think thing is, I follow most of the developers that I do through Twitter, and I can't always remember all the ones that are like working here in Toronto, like which ones are specific.
Right.
Because there's if you just search like hashtag game dev on Twitter, you'll find so many amazing projects, either tutorials or little experiments or beautiful graphic things that people are working on.
Right.
Um, Trying to think of people I know working on stuff right now here in Toronto. I think one thing, so I want to shout out to Laundry Bear Games that made Mortician's Tale. I think that's Gabby and Andrew together working on that, and they gave me a lot of advice when I was working on my work. I think there's also another game I know being made right now is Bravery Network Online. Um, and it's a group of indie devs. And I'm trying to remember the name for their collective. It's the Gloam Collective. I'm working on that, and
Cool.
they're kind of making a really cool like Pokemon like inspired like battle system, but like taken to a more strategic level and kind of online, and with a really great aesthetic and characters. Um,
That's awesome.
I got to play the beta or alpha of that game, and it was really good, and it's nice to see the progress going on there.
Good
Um,
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
and oh yeah, sorry.
No, no, no. Go
I'm
ahead.
trying.
Yours.
There's so much awesome stuff happening. But I'm just thinking about what comes to mind right now.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, oh, here's a question. Someone says, I used to go to a ton of meetups, Dames Making Games, Bonus Stage, Hand Eye Society before the pandemic to meet new people. What would you suggest doing instead now that pandemic shut them down? Are there like virtual game developer events that you're aware of that you would recommend? Or have there been any talks or meetups or things like that that you've been
Thing
involved
is,
in?
I don't have any of those. If I knew them, I'd wish to do them. I think one thing that has kept me a little bit in touch, but only to a certain extent, is Discords. I guess I have community of like other game developers that a few of them that I'm involved with on Discord, and it's a nice way to keep in touch with other game developers. But it's hard to you don't get that meetup experience there.
Yeah.
It's very different. To be honest, I don't have a good answer. It's pandemic sucks
It
in
does.
so many ways.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that we're losing that kind of space right now in the game dev space. But hopefully it'll be back. Hopefully, if it survives through the pandemic, whenever we get out of this. I guess it's difficult to make new connections if you don't already have them. So I guess leaning on the communities that you can find online of other people that that are interested in making games, either forming a space with friends that who are interested in making games and kind of like encouraging each other and sharing work. I think that's one way to keep in touch, but I don't think there's a great answer here.
There you go. Yeah, I think Discord for me has been pretty much it. Honestly, during quarantine, it was just Discord all the time, and obviously text your loved ones and stay in touch through technology. But yeah, pandemic has really hindered the ability for us to go out and meet new people at game development events. But I think for all of you in the audience, the GDDC is going to be doing a lot of cool fun stuff this semester that should keep you connected, so stay tuned for more of that. Are there any other questions for Adam? I think we're probably going to wrap it up in a minute or two. I don't want to keep this going forever, but yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to plug, Adam, like a social media or anything like that?
I don't know. I don't really have anything in particular. I've got my Twitter account where I post most of my game dev updates, but other than that, it's kind of like don't really have anything particular for myself.
Cool. There you go. Well, everyone go follow Adam on Twitter if you're not already. We got one more question. I think this is going to be our last one. So, hey, Adam, were you working elsewhere while developing a short hike? What? So I guess. Wait. Sorry, I'm going to give this a full read. How do you recommend balancing? So if I guess the question is, how do you recommend balancing life and game development? So a lot of people, I guess, do game development as a hobby, as we're all doing right now as students in the GDDC. And there's other obligations that sort of draw us away from that sometimes. And so what would you recommend as a balance between game development as a hobby and other work in the rest of your life? How did you juggle that during your undergrad?
Yeah, at least for me, it's always a struggle to fit in game development with everything else that's going on in life. When I had more free time when I was younger, I would just be making games like as a hobby, just filling up the spare time I had with making these little experiments. But when I got more busy in university, I think like one thing that really helped me bring myself back to game development was having game jams, and GD, the game design deathmatch, kind of gave me like a solid goal to work towards and something to pull me away from other obligations that I have to be able to meet that deadline. So I think, and also when I was working, after I finished university, I worked at a tech company for a few years. And it was really hard to find time to make games after work. I'm just too tired. Like there's stories of people who are they're so into making games that they're able to get home from work and spend like another 3 hours working on their game at night. That definitely wasn't me. Just too tired by the time the end of the day rolls around. So the times that I did make exceptions for that were I'd spend a little bit of time on the weekends, and I would also make time for game jams. So I did Ludum Dare and Global Game Jam and Toe Jam and stuff with friends. And even if I didn't get as much game jams or as much game development as I wanted to, there were kind of always these focused events where it gave me extra motivation to actually do some work and put something together, because there's some sort of like external event I could be part of. So at least for those, that was pretty valuable for me.
There you go, and there you have it. I think that's just about it. Apologies if I haven't gotten around to all of the questions, but I don't want to keep Adam here forever, so I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for attending, those in the audience, and Adam, thank you so much for coming in and answering these questions today. It was a pleasure having you here.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of
It's nice to
course.
be able to, I don't know, give back to the Game Design Development Club a little bit.
Totally, yes. We
Yeah.
appreciate this Q&A. It was I felt kind of starstruck when you agreed to do this because I'm such a big fan of A Short Hike. I don't want to gush too much,
Well,
but
thank
yeah, that was cool. So thank you so much. I think we're gonna end the stream here. Thanks for coming, everybody, and I'll see you next week at the meeting, I guess. Peace out.
you. All right. See ya. Take care.
You too. And we are offline. Cool, cool.